Welcome to episode 7 of the Build Insights podcast. Today I'm with Joe Gooden. Joe is a director of Build Zone Insurance, and we will be talking about LDI insurance, third-party auditing, relationships with industry specialists, and how people can get more involved with the industry moving forwards. Joe, thanks for coming on the podcast. We've been trying to do this for a while, and I know you're an incredibly busy guy, and so am I, but it's great that we finally managed to get ourselves together. We've worked together in various capacities, but more recently on the major project sort of side of things in terms of the auditing from my side, and the insurance side in terms of what you do. So what I'd like to do is sort of like do a brief introduction, go back a little bit in terms of how things started for you, and then we'll go from there. So in terms of, what is your job title? What do you do? How do you operate on a daily basis?
Yeah, first of all, Ben, thanks very much for having us on. Like you say, we've done a lot over the years, which has been really, really good. So great to finally come on and have a chat with you in a nice and relaxed setting. I'm a director of Build Zone, as you know. We work with yourself and ACS quite closely. Background is an interesting one. So I've been in insurance for 25 years this year.
Wow.
So yeah, straight out of school.
26-year-old, that's quite.
Yeah, I know. Honestly, you can't unfortunately do anything about the face. But yeah, it's one of those where not many people. You probably find that in technical auditing and clerk of works and stuff as well. Not many people to go to school and think, I want to work in insurance.
Well, absolutely. And to be honest, it's something I want to push into a little bit later through the podcast. But let's go there now in terms of your experience. When did you get involved with insurance?
Yeah, so I left school at 16. I worked on a market stall from 14 to 16 on Saturdays and just loved that interaction with people. So all I knew is I wanted to work in London, I wanted to wear a suit, and I wanted to talk to people. So left school at 16, and my dad's friend owned an insurance broker, and said to me, I went to college for 3 months, always wanted to be a sports journalist, and after 3 months, wasn't really earning any money. College, in my opinion, wasn't all that it was cracked up to be, and I kind of just felt like I wanted to go and do something else. So I went back to my roots, really. I'd done my work experience when I was at school at Aon in Romford. And it was just a great combination of learning things that you didn't know.
Yeah.
I worked in the aviation team, so just found the whole aerospace type stuff interesting. And they just seemed to have a real good camaraderie between the people that worked there and the clients they dealt with. So my dad's friend then said, look, why don't you come and work for me? So at 16, I left college after 3 months. Still did carry on for a few years after that, doing a bit of journalism in sport and in music as well. So still kept that passion for kind of English literature and writing, which I still do now on the insurance side as well. But yeah, at 16, I had the opportunity to go and work with Terry, who funnily enough has been bought by Howdens as Build Zone have over the years. Yeah, so
I was going to say, that was my next question. So what did Terry sort of say to you in that moment that thought, yeah, you know what, I'm going to give that a go? What was it that attracted you?
Yeah, I think where I always wanted to work in London and wear a suit, it was the opportunity to do that. But he was also just a really nice guy that wanted people to go out there and express themselves. So I worked for his company, which at the time was AJ Insurance, and they were more of a high street broker. So I started off working in the kind of telesales team, and it was all car insurance and house insurance. And really quickly, within probably 6 months, progressed from doing that to then doing commercial and doing contractors and doing shops and offices and that type of stuff. And they then ended up, they had like a counter. It was a bit like an old bank. So people then come in and they would come in and renew their insurance for their bar or insurance for their shop. So I was the guy. Yeah, it is nostalgic. And it was an old Lloyd's bank. And I ended up being on the counter, and within 6 months, I'd learned every single department, every single bit of information. They fed me every opportunity to go and learn. I took on board. Yeah, and 25 years later, this is where we are.
Was there a key point in that career that took you into the built environment? Obviously, you mentioned car insurance and sort of general insurance products. Was there anything that sort of made you think that's where I want to go, or was it a natural progression into that role?
Yeah, so I think in the first probably 4 or 5 years of my insurance career, it was mainly doing your general commercial business. I then found a bit of a specialism when I worked for Gallagher's. And it was a combination of doing real estate, but complex stuff. So the things that wasn't bog standard. And a lot of the requests I was getting from clients and brokers that we dealt with was for things that were a little bit out of the ordinary. Latent defects, obviously we know it as structural warranty, new home warranty, inherent defects, was one of those things that was kind of cropping up quite a lot.
Yeah.
And legal indemnities as well. So people wanting chancel repair, rights of light, that type of stuff. Yeah, so I think when that happened...
So we're talking about quite a lot of what we understand it. You've been doing it a long time. I've been doing a little bit less time from a different perspective. But part of the purpose of this podcast is to introduce what we do to people that might be looking to get into the industry. So we've talked about latent defects. We've talked about various other models, if you want.
Yeah.
Let's stick to latent defects for a minute, because arguably that builds the bulk of what we do together in terms of the auditing work I do and what you provide as a product to the market. But what does it actually mean? What is a latent defects policy? How does it operate? If you're going to buy one, what does it give you?
Yeah, so I think in simple terms that it's a policy that protects the structural envelope and the waterproof envelope of a building. So any defects in design, workmanship and materials, after the project's been completed, you can have a policy that lasts for 10 or 12 years.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time you'll have a contractor's insurance that will take care of anything that happens during the course of the build. One of the key things that we do, and obviously you guys do a hell of a lot of it for us, is that you guys will go out and audit that project during construction. Mm. But actually from an insurance perspective, we're not even on cover until it reaches practical completion.
Yeah.
And then we cover it for that long tail period of time.
So that's interesting. We sort of jump into a point now of where I fit into this. And it's, you could probably offer LDI cover without doing what I do. But nobody would.
Some do, don't they? But
okay, some do. But that's considered risky. Yeah. That's considered risky for all parties, I think, because one, you're placing cover onto something that you don't understand comprehensively in terms of the way something's been put together, but also you're selling a product at the end of the day that someone's buying. You know, ultimately there's a lot of cash behind these schemes.
Yeah.
Quite a lot of cash in some instances, and without that level of protection, it carries an inherent risk. So for the people that are providing that cover without, presumably for people trying to understand the concept of this, that's a bit of a non-product. Can I be risky enough to say that? I mean, because there's, you're buying something without the risk being measured. Is that a fair comment?
It's a really fair comment, and I think you've got two ways of looking at it, right? If we're sitting here as an underwriter saying we want to underwrite the best risk we can, and we want to take every single preventative measure we can to make sure that we're underwriting the best policy possible.
Yeah.
Then we need people like yourselves to be able to go out there, audit the risk throughout construction, and give us honest feedback of what you see on site. And then actually, if there are problems, they can be remediated as and when they're seen, so that when we get to the back end of building control sign-off and then issuing cover, we know what's happened during that period of time. If a surveyor goes out and never ever gives me a problem on a report,
a defect,
they're not doing their job, right? Because you must have seen every scheme you've ever done. You will never ever get a scheme with no problems, right?
It's inherent. Construction is formed of multiple assets, whether it be disciplines, whether it be entities, whether it be materials, skill sets, whatever it is. These are all variables that sit within a bigger process that we call construction.
Yeah.
And at any one time, the variable can shift. Occasionally you do get a job where they've got the right materials, they've got the right leadership, they've got the right timeline, they pay for the best products, and actually they're hard to report badly against and nor do you want to, because actually, but still what you'll get from us is a report that says, actually, we've considered all these aspects, this is still a good product.
Yeah.
I think where the risk comes from an auditor's perspective is presenting zero information to an insurer and saying, we didn't find anything, because that would make me inherently nervous. There's always something to do. There's always something to discuss. There's always a risk, a level of risk to measure.
I think what we've found over the years with competitors of ours is that people have historically only worked on building control reports, right? So if you're getting a building control report, some may be really elaborative in terms of information. There may be a lot of photos. It may say it's a cloudy, rainy, wet, sunny day. The coffee might be nice and there might be some good biscuits on site. But actually, their job as a building control officer is not to go out and report on workmanship. And the biggest cause of claims that we have in our industry is workmanship. Yeah,
and that's not necessarily their fault, right? Because compliance is compliance.
Of course it is.
Yeah. And workmanship's workmanship. And whilst building control is an incredibly important aspect of the built environment that we live in, no one will argue with the fact that it creates a minimum standard for compliance. That's what it's for. But when you're putting 10 years worth of risk onto a subject, you want a little bit more than compliance. You want to understand, is that what that compliance is formed of? What does the systems look like? How do the materials fit together? Has anyone considered this? Has anyone considered that? And all these things create a bigger picture, which is what we do to hopefully give you the ability to say, yeah, this is a viable risk. We want to take this on, or even mitigate that level of risk. And I think that goes much deeper. I'm going to talk from my perspective just for a minute, because that goes much deeper into the relationship. I think rather than just inspecting an aspect of work and giving my opinion on it, professional opinion indeed, but where the strength of what we do at ACS seems to work and it complements what you do at Buildzone is we create relationships with these contractors. We delve deeper. We sit down and we workshop issues with people. If there's something that on the face value doesn't work, we find a viable solution. And I think ultimately that's what separates approved consultant services from some of your, we won't name any names, but from some of the competitors out there. Have you experienced that from us? Or?
Yeah, of course. It's a really valid point. I've experienced it firsthand, as of my clients as well. And I think when you go out on a job, if myself or one of our other directors or other colleagues go out and see you guys at work, automatically from the minute you walk through the door, you see that client relationship.
Good.
And that's
we
exactly,
really try for that. So that's right. For me, that's great news. Yeah. It's great feedback.
And it's one of those things where the last thing you want to be is the kind of pain that people feel they have to make sure you're okay whilst you're going around and trying to do your job. Whereas with ACS, we feel that people welcome you onto site and you can automatically see there is that relationship there. And whenever a problem, I've been out on sites with you before and with some of your surveyors where, they'll spot something, they'll talk it through with the client on site, and there's 100% adherence from the client to go, yes, this is what we're going to do, let's work out the remediation strategy, and off we go. And that shows that trust.
Yeah, we follow it through, but not in an oppressive way. So it's not sort of like we're going to go away from here, go full bore keyboard warrior, and then ruin your day so that your peers can then criticise you. It's more a case of let's become engaged. And it's amazing. I think that, I recall a situation where, I don't know whether we were together actually, but I feel like we might have been, and we were on site looking at something, and people coming to me with problems. We were saying, "Look, you've sort of
that was one of the Renica jobs we was on."
Yeah, I think it might have been. Yeah. And rather than coming and saying, we've got, like, don't tell Ben, we want to keep this quiet, we want to hide it. It's like, look, we came across this. We want to make you aware of it. We'd rather discuss it with you than you pick it up later and find out that we're trying to hide it. And that is the strength of the relationship.
But also, that 100% shows how they value us collectively as part of that professional team. And I think from a latent defect structural warranty point of view and Buildzone and our technical auditors, we want to be part of that professional team. We don't want to be seen as the last thought insurance bit at the end, which a lot of the time it does come across that way. But I think we've collectively made a really good, point over the years of kind of going, guys, we want to get involved. We want to be involved in the design team meetings. We want to be involved early stages.
Yeah.
because then you build up that rapport, right?
You do,
and that's why they can...
understanding the project is that's where the interest comes. You create the interest, you create the sort of mental investment, and then one of the most interesting things that I've discovered over the years now, especially on the major projects with some of the flagship jobs that we've been privileged enough to work on, is you genuinely celebrate the completion of those projects with those developers.
You do, yeah.
You sit there and you go, look, what, that's incredible.
Yeah. How many topping out parties you've been to? Like
too many. Too many, but we'll keep that quiet for a minute. But yeah, no, it is. But the fact to be invited to that, it says a lot. But it all goes back to one thing, and that's relationships. Take away the faceless interaction that people seem to experience based on the feedback that I've received over the years and the contrast that people give me. We like working with you, we like working with BuildZone because we can speak to somebody, it's relatable, there's a conversation to be had. Not everything falls into a specific box. There's obviously a risk value that we need to manage. I mean, it's not casual. It's very serious business in terms of managing that risk and making sure that we adhere to the proper standards that give a product that is insurable. But there's means and ways of doing that without just being sort of black and white and saying, no, look, we're not, if it doesn't fit this exact criteria, we're not going to do it. We've talked about it so many times on the podcast, and I'll probably talk about it for the rest of my life, but there's a documentary to support that notion, and that was the viaducts.
Oh.
You and I were on that documentary, and frankly, in terms of what we've just talked about, if we didn't take that perspective on it, I would argue that project wouldn't have happened.
It 100%. That project, everyone else in the market from an insurance point of view had politely declined to get involved because of the fact it was so quirky. They didn't want to take the time to see if there was another way of doing it. Whereas when it landed on our desk, it was more of a, we're always proactive, right? And we're always looking at how can we find a solution rather than a reason not to do it. And obviously you guys were involved early doors on that as well. And as soon as we got talking to Salboy, Domis, Renaissance on the structural engineering side, we spoke to a few of our insurers, and although it's a massive project, right? Huge, prestigious, beautiful location, and now is a phenomenal development. In terms of kind of build cost, it's not one of the biggest we've done. It's big, but it's not too big.
It was up there, but it was just so evolutional in terms of the thought process.
And I think we turned around to the guys and said, look, we're going to need to get normally a risk of that size. Maybe one or two of our insurers would be able to do that for BuildZone. We needed 4 or 5 to get involved in that because of the quirkiness. And the fact that we were able to get Renaissance, Domis and Salboy, ACS, Bureau Veritas, and a couple of our key insurers around a table to talk through what our engineers thought were slightly problematic issues in terms of punching through the viaduct. 4 months later, Renaissance took that on board, redesigned how they were going to do it. That then made it acceptable, right? So we're rather than saying, "Oh my God, this is too difficult," the easy thing to do would have been decline that risk. What's actually happened now is we've underwritten it. We've got a phenomenal development, which has been captured numerous times.
It's such a good investment in terms of time. I think the people involved, you've mentioned a few names there, but every professional specialist that was involved in that scheme not only had the skill set, but was able to sit on, let's call it, a forum of all of us together, and we're just able to bounce off one another. And that's what made it work. It was collaboration.
Collaborative working, right?
In the truest sense of the word. Without collaboration, without the ability to sort of say, well, what is acceptable? Can we reach that? And the pure honesty as well. Without being specific, there was instances within that process where we said, look, no one knows how to do this. We've got to really sit down and come up with something that works, and then not only something that works, but then validate that detail, if you will, and then make sure that it satisfies the needs of all the stakeholders. So you've got the structural side, you've got the waterproofing side, you've got all these elements, and bring it all together, and that's what makes it such a large success. I'm prepared to take the challenge, but I don't know whether I'll ever beat that. in terms of a project. I think it's certainly this decade.
Yeah. I think if you talk to anyone involved in that, as we do on a regular basis, all of those guys will turn around and just go, I don't know if I can top it.
I know. Which is a shame, really, because I'm hoping to do a bit more.
Well, there is Viaducts too, right? So
there is Viaducts too, but I don't know whether it's going to be. I mean, it's going to be massive, isn't it? I mean, if you look at the scope of work, it's going to be probably the new. If you measure flagship as in terms of height and in terms of appearance and in terms of creating that skyline over Manchester, which I have the pleasure of enjoying every morning when I drive into the city, it's just that's going to take the biscuit, to be honest. It's huge. But going back to that, I mean, I drive, for those who live in around Manchester, I drive in on the M62, M602 every morning, and looking at the Rennica projects, Trinity Island project specifically, you see that climb every day, and it's quite humbling on the way into work.
It's funny, I was in a taxi. Obviously, I had the pleasure of coming over to your neck of the woods yesterday, and I was chatting to a cab driver this morning, and we were talking about work, and he said, what do you do? And I said, we do, a lot of latent defects, structural warranty. And he's like, what's that? And I said, we work with a lot of the big developers in Manchester, specifically, Rennica and Sailboy and Domus. And they were like, are you on the Trinity Way project? And I was like, yeah. And they were like, how on earth has that managed to be built in that constrained site? And I was like, it's going to be incredible.
Every credit to him. Not only does it happen quickly, but, we obviously audit that to micro detail in terms of the fundamental components of every aspect, every slab, every column, every shear link, all the way through to the carpets going in. And you've got to be honest and fair and say those people in particular that you've just mentioned, the Domus, Solboy, Rennica, they've really mastered this. But again, just to go back on sort of the common theme, if you will, it's because they've managed to create fantastic professional relationships.
Yeah.
I've been working on those projects for the best part of half a decade in this city, and I'm still dealing with the same concrete form workers.
Yeah.
I'm still dealing with the same kitchen fitters. Occasionally you bump into these people. Those relationships, the ability to help other people build their business around what is already a massive project, has given this incredible standard that always has to be challenged, because that's what we do, but it gets increasingly harder to do so, which I'm really pleased to say, because there's an evolving skill set there that creates a better product.
And we've been around sites, right, on both of those clients. They're just superb, aren't they? Doesn't matter what stage you go in at. The health and safety is fantastic. The cleanliness is brilliant. The workmanship's great.
It's cultural.
Of course it is.
They create a culture of success.
Yeah, and also if you're in that supply chain, whether that's from the groundworks up to the flat roofing, you deliver a good job. You've got that pipeline of future work, and I think that's one of those other things that there is that. We used the word earlier, collaborative working, and I think if you trust in the people you work, the same as we do with you guys and you with us. They have that exact same scenario.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Interestingly, just to sort of look at it the other way for a minute to create some contrast, I was overseas recently and speaking to one of it was the construction director actually for a fairly sizable developer. I won't name any names at this stage, but we sort of said, look, we're looking to get involved. We sort of very much want to be part of your journey, and these are the sort of things we can offer. And his fundamental concern was, look, if I ring you, will you answer the phone? Which to me is shocking, because, ultimately I expect people to ring my personal number and we'll have very sensible conversations about it. But it just goes to show the contrast within the industry, competitors, I'm talking from my perspective as opposed to yours at the moment. Maybe you can shed some light on that in a minute. But, ultimately, it seems to me on the face of that conversation that some of our competitors as third-party auditors can't even be contacted. Well, considering everything that we've just said in terms of collaborative working and relationships and creating a professional model that works together to achieve a greater goal, surely the fundamental skill set is to communicate. I think, ultimately someone needs to be able to speak to you, because otherwise how do you assist in controlling something?
Yeah.
I've never worked in your industry. I don't really understand the grassroots of how it works, but is communication... Well, it's got to be, right? It's a key skill set for what you do.
It is. I'm sure anyone listening to this podcast will say, I can never get hold of Joe on the phone.
But you're always speaking to somebody.
Exactly. That's 100%. That's 100% true. But it is. And the one thing, I think, we talk about AI and the interaction of all new technologies coming in. The one thing, whether it's insurance, whether it's auditing, doesn't matter what world you live in, the one thing you cannot beat is relationships, right? So whether that's face-to-face, which I still think is hugely valuable, would I have the same relationship I had with you if it was always over email? Absolutely not.
No.
Would our clients have the same relationship with you or me or any of our sales team or underwriters if they only ever dealt by email or on phone? No, they wouldn't. Putting a face to a name is one of those key skill sets. And also, I love the fact that being able to look in the whites of someone's eyes, I can tell if you're lying, right? If you want to sell me a dream, I'll be able to look at you and know within 2 seconds whether or not.
I agree. And I think it's also that responsibility. Look, auditing doesn't mean you're constantly agreeing with people.
No.
In fact, quite the opposite. There will always
you want challenges, right?
You need to challenge things, even if even if it's baseline acceptable. We, in contrast to the regulations, we're not aiming for minimum standard. We're aiming for much higher bar, and so inevitably you do have a row occasionally. Now that's not like a silly row. That's not an unprofessional row, but it's a differences of opinion to get to a higher place in terms of what you're trying to achieve. And to that extent, you've got to be accountable. What doesn't work is faceless emails. Just to go back to what you just said, sending an email to somebody, they get the hump with you immediately.
Of course they do.
Because there's no contrast to it. But if you stand in front of someone and say, look, I'm sorry, I just can't agree with you on this point. These are the reasons, right, that I need to achieve a higher standard.
Yeah. And
then you will inevitably find some balance.
You will.
But you can't do that unless you are a relatable person.
I think you mentioned earlier, right, being out on site, raising an issue, talking to them about it, and how to remediate it is a hell of a lot easier than sending an email post-visit to say, here's all the problems. And they might be thinking, I thought the visit went well. We didn't mention anything when we was out there.
Well, that is one aspect of it. But also, you create a load of issues. So occasionally you'll raise an issue and you'll have such a good conversation about it. It doesn't actually need to be raised because you've raised it, you've discussed it, and they go, all right, look, we're not going to put the screws in at 300 mil centres. We're going to put them at 150. And you stood, if you get involved enough, you're stood with the dry liner, for argument's sake, that's doing it. And I'll say, look, I prefer 150. The site manager, the project manager, whoever you're with, will say, okay, executive decision, put him in at 150. Good. Can you send me the QA for that when you've done? Yeah. That's now not going into a report. That's not getting emailed around the world. It's not raising concerns where you get people that read the report for all the right reasons, but people that read the report 3 months later and they go, oh, how much of this have we missed? We haven't missed it. We dealt with it. It got done. So let's not put it in because it's not an issue. And that's the point, because people read our reports in various capacities. You've got funders, you've got stakeholders, you've got all these people. And they're looking at it from a different risk perspective. And if someone picks up that report, for argument's sake, from a funding position and goes, well, is this a problem? Do I release, the
next drawdown or
whatever it is? Yeah. Do I do that? Even the fact that they're asking those questions could cause delays of, days and weeks. And the reality is it's not an issue. So it's about that measurement of, fundamentally, we don't want to provide any misinformation. We want to give you the right information, but we use the professional skill set we've got to decide on what to do there and manage the risk. And I think, again, just banging the nail, so to speak, you can't do that on emails. You've got to be present. You've got to be involved. You've got to be invested.
And I think one of the big things that we decided probably, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, if not slightly longer, was that where so many issues we have, our workmanship, the only way you're going to see those issues is by being out on site.
Yeah.
So, when we started, doing a lot more work with ACS, and some of our other technical auditors, we kind of turned around and said, right, we want you out on site, especially on the major projects, every 3 weeks.
Yeah.
There's no point in looking for a program and saying, okay, we'll go twice in the foundation, during the piling stage, and then we'll pop out 6 weeks later and 8 weeks after that, because so much happens. You know how quickly these bills go up, right?
They do, and plus you find a problem with the piling rig turns up, it starts putting its first pile in, it doesn't work. You've hit something, that program's gone.
Yeah.
So the 8-week schedule, the 12-week schedule, all these things, they've just shifted 2 weeks. It's gone. To constantly reset that is a nightmare. I like the way that we're instructed to do our job from Build Zone. I like not only does the periodic inspection typically does cover all bases, because obviously 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it is, you tend to hit each construction phase more than once.
Yeah.
Or if it's obviously a phase project, you hit those construction phases multiple times. But also, it reminds people who you are. So that constant interaction allows the development of these relationships.
Yeah. I know obviously you asked me the question earlier around how I got into insurance. You've obviously been in the built environment in different forms throughout your career. How did that all come about? I know your dad was a builder, wasn't he? Did that have any impact on where you ended up? Or?
I suppose so, yeah. I think Dad knew what he was doing in terms of construction and various bits of development, etc. But fundamentally, I got very, very quickly disillusioned with the whole construction side. I worked with various people, and for me, I'm quite annoyingly righteous, I suppose, in many ways. And I believe that doing things, if you're going to do something, do it right. And the industry, in various capacities, has shortfalls in it, in the sort of in the lower echelons of the industry, if you will, which I suppose is where I was working at certain points in my life. I was doing things, or being asked to do things, actually, rather than doing them, which I didn't agree with. Fundamentally, the standard wasn't being met. We were building various things and houses and homes for people, which is also always the way I looked at it. It was like a home rather than a building. Yeah, and there's a commercial aspect over the top. But so I came out of that, and when I came out of that, I ended up working in the building control world for a bit, which was great. Someone reached out to me, someone who I'm still in touch with, very much so, reached out to me and said, look, we think you'd be good at this, but obviously it's a whole new start and you're going to have to take a significant pay cut and all these things. But it was the best investment I ever made. So got involved in builder control, then got involved with the Clerk of Works side of that and developed that career. And then fast forward on, and here I am, sort of got involved. But sticking with construction quality is sort of my... that's where I want to be. I enjoy quality. Compliance was great, but again, that minimum standard of compliance was sort of, whilst it's incredibly important, don't get me wrong, there's sort of elements of my work that I was doing where I was going, this could be better. And I always want to go for more. If there's more to achieve in terms of quality, I want to push into it. But so when you're doing compliance, I think you end up in a position where you want to tell them to do more, but you can't. You're sort of restricted, if you will. Yeah, does that make sense?
True. Yeah.
So then getting into the Clerk of Works, which was great, but that's very contractual and sort of and taught me a lot. And I still do that. It's a big part of my life.
Yeah,
still.
I saw the podcast recently that you done, which was
with the Institute. Yeah,
really
fantastic. Yeah, the Institute of Clerk of Works is a fantastic organisation. Watch that podcast, and there's a lot more to come from that arena. But I really sort of found my what's the word? Not niche, because it all sort of builds together. But I operate. I feel like I operate, is for you to say rather than me, I guess, very well in the auditing processes, because you're pushing for that higher standard. There's a value at the back of it in terms of the policy, which is good, because that gives you, actually go back a step if I can. So being a Clerk of Works at the moment, unless you're built into the contract, sometimes, occasionally, far too often rather than not, you end up in a situation where you've got the bark, but not the bite, because you're not a statute role. You're not, there's nothing really at the back end of it. People either invest in you and they choose to listen and do the job properly, which is what you hope for.
Yeah.
But inevitably people don't. Cost too much, whatever. There's commercial value that overrides your presence. Whereas in the sort of LDI audit market, there's obviously something to achieve at the back of it, which is cover.
Yeah. I think on the auditing side, at the end of the day, whether it's us, whether it's one of our competitors, whether it's residential, build to rent, commercial, no one is going to be able to issue any type of cover without that technical auditor signing off on the project.
Good.
So the gravitas, hence why you're...
Pleased to hear it, thanks.
But yeah, the gravitas, that's what it's there for. You've got that key role in making sure that from a build zone perspective, we're getting an independent assessment of that build. Don't get me wrong, on a blank piece of paper, every project is before a spade's been put in the ground.
Yeah.
As we know, we've looked at part complete projects, we've looked at fully retrospective projects. And even then, there's different ways that you can skin a cat. So we'll get, ACS or ACS engineering or, a structural engineer to go out and do a condition report on a build and give us that kind of insight and review the QA. And that's also where, if we've got a set of clerk of works reports from someone, that's another bit of quality auditing information that we can look back on and go, actually, there is a record of what's gone on.
I think Clerk of Works in particular is, in terms of its skill set, it's a deep dive in terms of the detail that you can go into if you're allowed. That's the contrast, isn't it? But the deep dive on the standard, but also sort of the contractual relationships within that sort of model as well, which is important.
Can I ask you a quick question, right? So what's the difference? I know the answer, but for anyone that's listening, what's the difference between what you would do as a technical auditor on, say, a build zone job and what you would do as a clerk of works?
So the fundamental answer is positioning. So positioning as a clerk of works, you're typically part of that client team that sits in and understands so positioning, actually, let me go back a step, positioning and the amount of time that you get to fully understand something. So obviously we talked about the auditing for the warranty side of it. There tends to be, a periodic inspection or, a key stage inspection, depending on the scope of works. Whereas with a clerk of works, you would sit and you would listen to various design changes, be part of those design changes. You'd offer, advice against variations within the contract, whether that be cost, quality, time, or an offset of all three. And you're sort of more integral to the operation of the site generally, as opposed to looking at it from a third-party perspective.
Okay.
That's the fundamental difference. The level of insight that it gives you as a clerk of works is obviously you understand the restrictions on a given subject. So it might be that, I don't know, it might be finishes. And it would only ever really be something... The only compromise you would ever give would be on something that is cosmetic, as opposed to obviously life safety and forming material. What's the word? Function of the building. So you would never compromise in any aspect on that. But also you get to see things more often. And workshopping. So you create sort of a standard. And you'd go in and you discuss with the contractors, look, when you're using this, let's make sure that we follow the white book, for example, on the plastering side of things. Okay. Yeah. Let's make sure we've got the right screws in. Let's make sure we do all these things. Now, there's an aspect of that with warranty as well. But when you're looking at things 3 weeks apart, then obviously you're relying on the fact that somebody else is doing that anyway, and you've got the professional skill set of the subcontractor. So really, that's it. So to summarise, it's positioning and accessibility to the scheme that allows you to just be to give a deeper dive on that.
And I suppose you're looking at everything kind of cradle to grave, aren't you? If you're in from early doors,
you are. But whilst we're talking about it, it depends on how much access you're given.
Yeah, because I suppose someone could turn around and say, "I want a clerk who works 4 days a week," and you'll get others that will say, "I want one once a week."
Alternative, you get people that say, "I want someone 7 days a week," but they don't tell you anything. I think it's probably a bigger conversation to have later. But there's a lot of people now are coming around to the fact that a clerk of works is a huge asset to have on site. It's someone to bounce ideas off. It's someone that will complement the process.
Yeah. But
there's still an element in the industry of people that, because it's a client side operation, they see you as the enemy. I know that sounds extreme, but they just do, and it's like there's a resistance to share, and there's that lack of collaboration, if you will, and that turns into something a little bit more in depth on those types of projects, unfortunately, and it becomes a bit sort of I don't know what the word is really, but it's difficult to work in that environment.
Yeah.
The message is that working together is the key. Ultimately,
we're going back to that relationship and collaborative approach, right?
Yeah. But it's a mindset thing. The industry is still in transition. I think there's been a lot of change recently. But what I will say is, from my experience, is this is an opinion rather than a fact. Is those people that do embrace it, those people that are willing to collaborate, are doing far better. Yeah, and I think we've seen that firsthand.
Yeah, the proof's in the pudding, right?
I think so. Yeah, it's clear as day.
What do you think in terms of young people coming into the industry? Do you think there's a different skill set if you want to go into technical auditing or clerk of works?
So there's always been two routes to both, I would argue. Well, first thing, actually, this is something I'm going to be doing hopefully a lot more of next year, but no one, certainly me, and there's only one other person I know who's actually on the podcast that went to college and came out of it knowing he wanted to be a clerk of works. I think typically the route to clerk of works and auditing, if you will, is either a degree route in terms of QS or something like that what then becomes more of a technical auditor, or obviously you've got your structural engineering side, etc. Or the other side of it is you've got tradespeople coming through, so you've got people that have been on the tools or site management, and then they transition into an auditing thing. And there's huge value from both aspects of those people. Different values, I would argue, but huge value nonetheless. However, I think on a bit of a personal mission and in collaboration with the Institute of Clerk of Works, I really want to develop that. I really want to go into the education system and make people aware that this is a viable option. Warranty auditing, clerk of works, but not as a second thought, not as a transitional route, but start.
You can leave school, leave college, and it's a viable option to go into.
It's a viable career. It's got good prospects. It's got definitely got progression within its skill sets and its roots. So that's something I really want to develop. But if your question is, what was your question? Was your question?
So it's just like if I'm a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
If you're sitting there saying, I've got a blank piece of paper and I want to develop a technical auditor or develop a clerk of works.
Yeah.
Would I, as a 16-year-old, I'd love to be 16 again, by the way, many years ago. Would you be looking for certain skill sets in terms of, either personality or what subjects they've been really good at school?
Yeah. So
would any of those dictate?
Subject-wise, it's tricky, isn't it? Because no one really
there's not construction. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But obviously further education leads into that. So I think, construction management courses are good. I think having a trade is obviously a fantastic asset in terms of future progression. But more importantly, probably than the education side of things is the attitude side of things, is the personality side of things. It's not easy. We work in all weathers. We work in the winter the same way as we work in the summer. We deal with people that can be your best friend and then be quite contentious. You've got to be robust, but above all else, you've got to have integrity, personal integrity. You've got to be able to hold your own. If you're in a room of 5 people and 4 of them against you, and you honestly believe your position is correct, you've got to stand your ground in a professional, not in a contentious way, but in a professional way, and sort of you've got to hold your own. And integrity is such a huge aspect of it. Practically, in terms of people wanting to get into the industry, 16-year-old listening to this now that's looking what to do next, there's a few people you can contact. I'm one of them. Contact me via the podcast. I'll be more than happy to push you in the right direction. I'm sure, between us, we can offer the right advice. And also the Institute of Clerk of Works, which is a fantastic organisation which will help people develop that skill set. And there's also profiled routes to becoming successful in that. But reach out, I think, is the key. Ultimately reach out, discuss it, and until we establish those firm routes of progression from secondary school education into the industry, the whole point of this podcast, amongst other things, is to achieve exactly that.
Yeah.
To allow people to understand what we do.
Yeah, so if there is anyone out there at the moment that's looking to wondering what they want to do next, get in touch.
Yeah, so if anyone did want to get in touch with us, follow the podcast on Instagram, which is build_insights, or contact us via LinkedIn. Just Google my name. We'll be posting this on the Instagram anyway, and I'm sure you wouldn't mind if people got in touch with you either.
Absolutely not. No, yeah.
So we'll tag. Obviously, you're going to be tagged in on this when we get it out there. So I think, keen to speak to people. Again, it all comes back to one place: it's relationships, and we're a very supportive group of people. We really do want to see people come in and sort of carry on the legacy of what we're trying to achieve in the industry. So start with us, and then we'll see where we can get you.
Sounds good. I've got one more question, right? I know it's your podcast that I'm guessing on, but I'm asking.
I like it. Keep going.
So there's a big thing in insurance about women in construction.
Yeah.
Not just in insurance, but in construction in general. What is certainly from an insurance broking and insurance company world, there are a hell of a lot more ladies and women involved in insurance now than there ever has been. Yeah. There's specific things that are going on in terms of awards and, conferences and that type of stuff and networking to kind of bring them into the world. We know that's happening in construction as well.
Yeah.
What about technical auditing? Is there... I honestly can't think of one person that we deal with or who is an actual on-site auditor that is a female. Is that...
No, you're right. It's still predominantly a male-led industry, which is unfortunate, to be honest, because some of the best operators I know in the wider industry are females.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And I'd love to see more of it. I think going back to what we just said earlier, the sort of transitional routes at the moment being trades and this and that and the other, it's sort of still in that framework of that's what it's going to look like. But ACS has had a few female auditors over the years, but obviously, things change, and I'd like to see more. I think ultimately, there's a huge skill set gap there that can be filled by anyone who wants to do it. Gender irrelevant. Get it. If you're an operator, to be sort of, then you're an operator, right? Fact. And but yeah, there's probably some social barriers to break down there in terms of, and maybe this is the way to do it. Ultimately, we want everybody here. If you're good at your job, I want you. Yeah. Simple as that.
It's a good message. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's and there's definitely an increase in women in construction.
Yeah, there is, without a shadow of a doubt.
Which I think is excellent. But yeah, maybe we can be the catalyst for change in the auditing world. And I, for one, would be very keen to speak to anyone that's interested in the role that feels as though their gender is a barrier to it.
Yeah.
Let me disband that immediately. Contact me. We'll talk about it. It's really not. That's a misconception. But interestingly, I think moving forwards, we'll be looking at that more closely with a few of our colleagues in the industry, and a separate podcast. We're going to be discussing what some of those perceived barriers are. Not to say that people misunderstand, but I think there's some fairly strong. I don't know what you'd call them, but just social barriers that need to be thrashed out, and we need to understand that. I would be delighted to work with more females in my role, and yeah, can't answer it better than that. Really, that's it. Is that your last question?
It is. Yeah.
So we talked about the people getting into the industry, but I think it's our responsibility as people that now have a stronghold in it to offer an environment that's suitable for people to come in.
Yeah, of course.
What do you think we need to, if anything, what do you think we need to change to make the industry more accessible? And have you got any idea of what that looks like from your perspective?
I think insurance has always been one of those things where you either go into it because of the fact that your mum or dad was in it, and it's a nice, easy pathway to working in the city. Not necessarily London, but any of the cities.
Yeah.
You then also get and London's probably overpopulated with these people at the moment. That's my opinion, not a fact, as you alluded to earlier. But you do get a hell of a lot of graduates coming to the industry after doing a degree that's not an insurance degree, and coming into the city at 23, 24, 25, and thinking that they've got a wealth of experience in what you do.
Yeah.
The reality is they have no experience in that. You could be, as I said, when I started at 16, by the time I was 17, I would have more experience than a 25-year-old grad coming into the city.
The University of Life, they call
that. University of Life, 100%. And you learn on the job. So I think my one bit of advice to anybody, irrespective of whether you're 16 or whether you're 25, learn from the people that are in your business.
Understand the rules.
Understand the rules. Shadow the people that have got that real life experience of dealing with things you do.
Yeah.
We can all read a textbook. Okay, whether that's insurance, whether that's construction, whether that's football management. We see this all the time. Are you a good coach? Yeah. Generally, a coach that's played the game is better than a coach that's read the textbook and passed the coaching badges.
Do you think that is a respect thing? As in, if you know someone's played the game, if you know someone's been through the rough and tumble of doing the job, you tend to hold a little bit of respect.
You do.
That's not to say other people aren't to be respected. Don't get me wrong. But, it's like... So from my perspective, sorry to cut you off, but just to interject, from my perspective, the amount of times, especially when I was a younger surveyor, which is, I still am trying, hanging on. But no, when I was much younger and I was trying to cut my teeth in terms of, and you were speaking to tradesmen or tradespeople, and they'd be like, well, I've been fitting these roofs for 20 years. Having a carpentry background, my skill set, before I went into construction management, before I then came up into surveying, gave me the ability to say, right, give me the hammer. I'm going to show you how to do this. Yeah. And that did 9 times out, not always, because some people you can't please, but 9 times out of 10, that did earn me a level of respect that made people go, all right, well, you can't kid a kidder, ultimately. So I think... Without a shadow of a doubt. Do you think that's relatable?
It is. And I go back to the football analogy. If a coach is telling a child or an adult to do something, they can read that out of a book. Can they show them how to do it?
Yeah.
The best coaches are someone that can say, I want you to do X, Y, Z drill. This is how you do the drill.
And also, this is why you do it.
Of course it is.
Isn't it nice to know why you do something right? So from a go back to my analogy then, so from a construction perspective, a carpentry perspective, putting a roof on, we need to put those in because this will be the issue if you don't.
Yeah.
And this is how you do it. That's not patronising. That is allowing people some insight as to why you require something that they may think is insignificant.
Yeah. I don't know about you. I'm 41, right? Every single day. you're not, however, you're not too many not too many years off. Every day's a learning day. If anyone, how many meetings have we been in with clients where they ask a question? Obviously, generally we answer 99% of those questions, but if there's a question they ask that we don't know the answer to, we will have absolutely no hesitation in saying, we'll go back and check with the expert in that area and we'll come back to you.
Yeah.
The client benefits from that so much more than giving them an answer out of a textbook that might not be the right answer for their particular 100%. Situation.
And I think that creates respect, actually. And just continue my analogy in terms of going back to that carpenter doing the roof, and it's happened several times. I'll say, this is why I want you to do this. This is the importance of it. And I'll say, yeah, but I'm doing it like this because.
Yeah.
And it's that being able to say, actually, I never thought of that. That's smashing. Yeah, if you can do that and document the fact that you've done it, send me the evidence that you've done it, then that's actually better than my solution.
Yeah.
That is the ability to learn, the ability to listen to good advice and to develop,
I know we touched on this earlier in the podcast about relationships. And I can tell you so many stories over the years of, when you walk into the Lloyd's of London building and you're presenting a risk to an underwriter, not in the latent defects world, because they don't, unfortunately, underwrite that class of business anymore in Lloyd's, but you used to be able to walk into Lloyd's and you'd sit down with your underwriter, you present the risk and you tell them the story as to why you needed their support on a risk.
Yeah.
Okay. You've done that because of the fact that, one, you understood the risk in the first place. Secondly, you had the relationship with the person you're talking to, and you're sitting as far away from them as we are now.
Okay, so it's very personable.
Yeah, very personable. Yeah, probably even a little bit closer. And I'm looking at you and I'm telling you the story as to why I need your 10, 15, 20% support on a risk. And generally, if you knew the risk and you knew the person, you get the right outcome.
Yeah, it weeds out the chances, doesn't it?
It does.
That's the difference.
Unfortunately, now, where with a lot of the younger people that are coming into the industry, you can't teach that relationship.
Yeah.
So someone will go in and they'll talk to you and say, I want you to do this risk and I want 20%. And the guy says no.
Oh, why? My favourite question. Why?
If you can't answer why, why are you even in the building in the first place?
So you think that's a skill set that's died out?
I think it's incredibly important. And I think now, more than ever, especially in the challenging, world we've been in the last couple of years, COVID, inflation increases, insurers pulling out of certain types of business, the relationship is the thing that gets the deal over the line. So take on board any advice you can get. You don't have to be... If I was 25 again, I'd love to be, first of all.
You want to be 16 10 minutes ago.
Well, I know, yeah. 25's a better
Compromise is getting more valid.
But if I was 25 again and the opportunity to go out with a 50-year-old and him introduce me to his underwriters for me to build that bond with them, there's nothing better.
Yeah, no, I agree. And to be honest, I think in large, that's probably a blessing that I've had over the years. I always worked with people that had more experience than me, and I always listened, and I think that's given me the insight I need, no pun intended, to sort of operate the way I do now, which is fantastic.